Have you ever dated an avoidant attachment style and found yourself wondering, are they really over their ex? Well, in today's video, we are going to do a deep dive into exactly that, the avoidant attachment style, limerence, and the phantom ex. Now, if you're not familiar right now with what these concepts are, don't worry, because we are going to break down all of it. We are going to talk about what limerence is and the difference between that and infatuation or just a typical crush. We are then going to dive into how that actually affects the dismissive avoidant attachment style and how this relates to the phantom ex and how this all ties together. So, my goal for you is that by the end of this video, you walk away with a deep understanding of these really important concepts and also know exactly what to do if you find yourself in a situation like this. And I think a lot of these things today will actually surprise you. In fact, when I first learned about a lot of these concepts as a whole, and in particular how they apply to the dismissive avoidant, I found myself really surprised and even quite shocked. So, what is limerence and how does this all tie together? Well, limerence is a concept originally discovered by Dorothy Tenov in 1979, and it's basically defined as a state of mind where somebody is obsessively infatuated with another person and constantly thinks about them to the point where it impacts their daily life. Now, a lot of people, when I've had these discussions on podcasts or in other places, will say, well, what's the difference between just typical feelings or infatuation for somebody versus actual limerence? And the real line between these things is basically defined by six major areas. Number one is the frequency of obsession. Often, when somebody's in limerence, they will very frequently think about somebody to the point where it's almost nonstop. They almost live in this fantasy realm of obsessiveness over and over again. The second is the intensity of obsession, meaning the intensity of feelings is so strong and it's often marked by not even necessarily being in a relationship or even dating somebody that you're in this degree of limerence with. And this is what's going to surprise you when we roll this back into a dismissive avoidant in a little bit. But you'll generally see that somebody in a state of limerence may go on one date with somebody before falling into limerence, may go on a few dates with somebody, but can also just have a huge degree of limerence for somebody that they don't even really know, like a coworker that you passed in the hallway a week ago, or a character that you even found on television. And yet, the intensity of the obsession and the degree of feelings that somebody feels for this person is very extreme and intense, in particular in relationship to how little the person might actually know about their object of limerence or this really strong crush that they're essentially having. Number three is the degree of self-abandonment. Interestingly enough, the more we are fantasizing about somebody and we're really caught up in the state of limerence, we kind of aren't here in the present doing our own lives. Number four, there's a big impact of limerence on our daily life that you wouldn't just see with a typical crush. When somebody is in limerence, you'll generally see that they literally are not focused or present on so many of their regular duties, and they may even fall behind for a period of time in their career goals, financial goals, even self-development goals, or their ability to really show up and do their hobbies and be invested in those things, or be around friends. In fact, often when people are in a state of limerence, they will isolate more. And they will actually spend more time going through things like the person's social media or just spending time alone fantasizing about this person in their mind, even going so far as to even cancel plans with friends, family, or with their hobbies. And we'll generally see that as these huge characteristics come about, we will see a decline in a person's emotional state outside of their limerent fantasies. And often limerence has actually been characterized with a lack of reciprocity from the other person. This isn't always the case, but often is. So, do avoidant attachment styles experience limerence, and what does this have to do with the phantom ex? Well, the answer to this question is yes. Avoidants do experience limerence. And the general differences, which is so interesting about this, is that dismissive avoidants will often experience limerence where it meets their needs without having them to have to deal with their own core fears about relationships. What does that mean? Well, if you take a dismissive avoidant attachment style, they still have relationship needs just like anybody else. And so they will often fall into limerence with unavailable people. Why? Well, the reason being is in my fantasy, If I can't get my needs met in the present moment, whenever we break into the fantasy world, it basically simulates us getting our needs met. So if you think of this fantasy with this person that you're in limerence with, and you imagine all the things that you would do and all the needs that they would meet of yours, it's actually, in a sense, indirectly getting your needs met in the present moment. To a lesser degree, of course, than if that was happening in real life, but it's almost like operating as a band-aid solution. With a dismissive avoidant in particular, they are usually not in limerence with people who are actually available to them. They are usually likely to fall into limerence with people who are unavailable because they can get their needs met in the fantasy world about somebody and, in a sense, get closer to those needs being simulated, but they don't have to face their fears of, you guessed it, vulnerability. And so what you'll generally see is that dismissive avoidant attachment styles are very likely to fall into limerence with people who are their exes or people who are even on television characters, movie stars, things like that, where they may have not even had these interactions with somebody. And so what often happens is the dismissive avoidant, when they can't get their relationship needs met in the present, because often that can be difficult if you don't want to be vulnerable or open up, they will imagine out these fantasies where those needs are being met with an ex from the past. Now, it's really interesting. Something about limerence that's extremely important to note is that generally when we are in limerence, it's actually us being in a position where we are trying to get those needs met. And those very specific fantasies that you're having about limerence, and this is something that was so surprising when it comes to dismissive avoidance, are often representing the things that you feel most disempowered to get in your present life. So, dismissive avoidance, they have big needs to be accepted, to be supported, to be empathized with, to be understood. And thus, they will often create these fantasies with their object of limerence in their mind where they imagine out scenarios where somebody is really seeing them and understanding them or really acknowledging them and noticing how great they are or really empathizing with them, accepting them, supporting them. And that is their subconscious mind strategy to get closer to those needs when they're feeling disempowered to get those needs met in front of them. Now, this is not a conscious mind process. Nobody's doing this intentionally or like, I realize my needs are not met. And so I'm going to imagine a fantasy realm where they do get met, project that onto a person who I infatuate with. And that will suffice for now. These are not conscious mind processes. This is just the subconscious mind really at work. And so how this relates most specifically to a phantom ex is that oftentimes when a dismissive avoidant leaves a relationship, if they get into a new relationship and somebody is not meeting all of their needs, maybe they're meeting a lot more because the ex is probably an ex for a reason. But when somebody is not meeting all of those needs, they may go into memories from the past of when this person in their past relationship experience did show up to meet their needs. And they will often imagine these fantasy worlds of that person coming back and meeting those needs instead. And this is where you may hear the dismissive avoidant have these mild comparisons of you to their ex, or talk about their ex in a way that maybe makes you have a bit of a red flag or second guess something or sort of be taken aback. Oh, my ex used to do this and I notice you don't do it. These types of commentary. And those are obviously not healthy things to be saying to somebody in a relationship because it can make somebody feel really uncomfortable, but they actually symbolize unmet needs that usually the dismissive avoidant themselves is not even aware about and is not communicating about. So, there's some really powerful things that we can do with this information. But before I go into exactly that, I do just want to let you know that if you want to take a deeper dive into the concept of limerence, you can fully, for free, for a whole 14 days. We do this once a year. Just for Mental Health Month of May, we do a full 14-day free trial to the Personal Development School. If you want to check out Limerence as one of the courses in there, there's tons and tons of courses and programs, and we have daily support webinars in there. You can join in and jump in for those. I'll put a link below, but you can check out our Limerence course and actually how to overcome limerence or heal limerence, and even have discussions with somebody who may be limerent around you. And it's designed to really help fast track this process and have a deeper understanding. You can check it out fully for free if you want to do a deeper dive, and I'll put that link down below. Now, what we need to be doing here is we need to be recognizing that when somebody is in limerence, they're in limerence because it's their subconscious mind's ways of trying to get closer to needs that they feel a state of learned helplessness to basically gain access to in their lives currently. And so what we want to be able to unpack very specifically is what are the needs that are being met in my fantasy? Or, ask the person in your life if you think they're going through this. Hey, are you fantasizing about people from the past? Or, do you have somebody who may be a movie star or somebody like that you always had a crush on? And if so, if you spent a lot of time, you spend a lot of time focusing on them, what would you imagine was happening in those kinds of situations? Now, of course, this may be a shy topic for avoidant attachment styles in particular, but if you are feeling comfortable enough and able to broach this, that's always very effective. And when we can unpack, or if you are the dismissive avoidant listening to this is super helpful for you. When you can unpack what your fantasies are of limerence, like maybe you imagine somebody seeing how great you are at something, or maybe you imagine somebody really protecting you and having your back, or maybe you imagine somebody, going out of their way to make you feel supported or cared for or loved. These are generally those very specific things we fantasize about represent the things we're starving for inside. And when we can learn to meet those needs in the relationship to self, but also communicate them to our partner, that's how we get out of limerence and bring our needs out of the fantasy world into reality so that we can then really take those big next steps towards healing and towards growth. So I hope you enjoyed this topic for today. Definitely an interesting one to do a deep dive into. Thank you so much for stopping by. Please like, share, and subscribe if you're enjoying this video, and can't wait to see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.